Now
when
you
we
tell me
talked when we talked last time, you were talking about Myra Hess.
Yes.
Now this time, I'd like you to talk about yourself.
Oh, I know. I remember.
So
you began to get me onto myself at the end of Myra Hess, and
That's right.
I got on with alacrity.
Yes. So this time, of course, we're going to celebrate.
Yes.
And I guess when you started composing, women composers were even rarer birds than they are now. Did you
Awfully
give
few
that a
of
thought?
them. Awfully
Did
few of them around. Yes, I studied at the Royal College of Music with Sir Charles Stanford, who was the teacher of Vaughan Williams and Holtz and Frank Bridge and all those, and my husband too, and all those fellows. And I was his only girl pupil, and it was considered something rather unusual. And when I had that one little whiff of success that I've had in my life with the viola sonata, tying, you know, I think I told you about
Yes.
that, tying with Ernest Bloch. The rumor went around, I understand. Of course, it was all under pseudonym, you know, and then when it discovered, I think I told you about that.
Yes. Well, I will ask you all over again for
Oh.
this one. Sure.
Well, shall I tell you now? Oh, well, it's apropos of this, really. The rumor went around, I hear, that I hadn't written the stuff myself, that somebody had done it for me. And I even got one or two little bits of, I don't know if I've still got them, I doubt it, little bits of press clippings saying that it was impossible, that I wouldn't have written it myself. And the funniest of all was that I had a clipping once which said that I didn't exist. There wasn't any such person as Rebecca, and there wasn't any such person as Rebecca Clarke. That it was a pseudonym. Now these people have got most beautifully mixed. It was a pseudonym for Ernest Bloch, and I thought to myself, what a funny idea that when he writes his very much lesser works, that he should take a pseudonym of a girl, that anybody should consider this possible. And the joke was that this was sent to me by a friend from England, I think. I think it came out in an English paper. And I was in Singapore at the time, and I had an extreme feeling of unreality, as if I really didn't exist. I mean, being in a place like Singapore and getting a clipping to say there wasn't such a person as me was a rather strange experience.
Now, did you, when you began your composition studies,
Yes.
Did you have any feelings that it was an unusual thing for a woman to be doing?
I don't think I thought about it very much, one way or the other. I just wanted to do it. My father knew Sir Charles slightly, Sir Charles Stanford, and sent him one or two songs I'd written, very bad songs. Thank goodness they're torn up. And Sir Charles wrote back, I think I have that note, saying he thought he detected one or two traces of talent and that he would take me as a student. Those were his words. So I was very much thrilled and honored that he took me.
Oh, wonderful. Now, when did you really begin writing seriously and writing in...
On my own?
Yes.
I think I started... I really find it awfully hard to remember. I think I started when I was over here once. You see, I've always had, my father being American, I've always had relatives over here, and I think I was on a visit here when I started. And I wrote some songs. That song, Shy One, is the first song I ever wrote. I was very young. I think I was 22 when I wrote that. And that I wrote in England. But, no, I think I was writing just small things at first, songs, violin pieces.
Your instrument was the violin, wasn't it?
Viola.
Viola.
Viola, like everybody else. And, I'll tell you something that will amuse you. I played once at a recital in the old town hall, and you remember, you don't remember, of course, but there was a place called Town Hall on 42nd Street.
43rd Street, yes.
43rd.
Yes, certainly.
42nd.
Oh, you mean Times Hall?
No, Town Hall.
Town Hall's still there.
No, wait a minute.
It was
Aeolian
Aeolian Hall.
That's
right.
what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Aeolian Hall.
Yeah, that's gone.
And I played 2 groups, and in each group there was something that I'd written myself, because you know there are awfully few solos for viola. And I think I also played some duets. But anyhow, I wanted rather to play another piece I'd written. And I thought, this is too silly to put my name down. This was before the viola sonata affair. It seemed too silly to put my name down still once more. So I thought I'll invent a name. So I went through the rivers of England until I came across what sounded like a handy surname, and I took the name Trent. I knew nothing from the River Trent. I knew nothing about Trent's last case in those days and all that. But no, this is one, and I took the first name Anthony because I liked that name. And this is one for women's lib, because although the piece by Anthony Trent was not particularly good, it had much more attention paid to it than the pieces that I had written, I mean in my own name, which is rather a joke. And people would ask me about Anthony Trent, and I was rather self-conscious at having invented him, and I think I would blush. I still could blush in those days, and I would blush, and I think I could see in their faces that they thought, ah yes, there's a romance somewhere, you know.
Did Anthony Trent ever reappear?
No, I let him die an easy death after the viola sonata affair, because that was really, in a way, my start. I had it made a little bit of a rustle because I was a girl at that time, and I had my picture in the Times and my picture in Vogue and all that sort of thing. I thought I was terribly important.
Now, I remember last time you showed me a program where Dame Myra had participated in a program of your music.
That was years later.
That was much later.
Yes, Harold Bauer. But the sonata was played. I think I told you the circumstances that it came in second, didn't I?
Yes, you did. I will want you to tell me all of that over again.
I beg pardon?
I will want you to tell all of that over again.
You do want me to tell it all over again?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, Mrs. Coolidge used to have her chamber music festivals in Pittsfield, Mass. I had a friend I used to stay with in Pittsfield, Mass. And I met Mrs. Coolidge once or twice. And the first year, she had a prize for a string quartet. And the second year, I was taking a drive with my friends and with Mrs. Coolidge. And Mrs. Coolidge said, now look, Rebecca, I'm offering a prize for a viola sonata. Now, why don't you write one? And I thought, well, I'd rather like to. And I'd got 1 or 2 little snippets of things I'd jotted down, you know, that I thought might fit in. So I wrote it. I wrote it in Detroit. I was staying with a brother of mine who was a businessman in Detroit at that time, with Burroughs adding machines. I didn't let the adding machines do it, though. And I wrote the sonata, and I thought it really hadn't turned out too badly. Although I must say now, although I'm not ashamed of my old stuff, I can see lots of places I wish were different, but that can't be helped. And I sent it in under a pseudonym. I chose a little scrap from de Musset that I quoted for pseudonym, which I've actually, out of sentimentality, had printed on the copy.
Now, this was the way it was supposed to be. The contest was such that you were to submit a piece without your name.
Without my name.
That's right.
What you did was you sent an envelope to accompany the work, and in the envelope was your name and address, and on top of the envelope was a pseudonym, so that all they knew was the pseudonyms, but they knew which was Bloch, because Bloch was unmistakable. And of course I should have felt awful if it had gone the other way and I had been given which I nearly was, because you see they had 6 people on the jury, and they went 3 and 3 and they wouldn't budge. And finally Mrs. Coolidge broke the vote. I think I told you. And she said to me, and you should have seen their faces when they saw it was by a woman. But that's how that happened. And it was played at the festival there by Harold Bauer and a viola player called Louis Bailly, who was a very fine player indeed, the viola player of the France Allée quartet. But I really would have felt awful if I got the prize. I should have been very glad indeed to have had $1,000, which seemed a lot of money then, much more than it seems now. But because I had admired Bloch enormously, I didn't know much of his music at that time, but later on I became quite a lot influenced by it. You know, I know that there are traces of bits where I more or less cribbed, as Vaughan Williams used to say.
Now, what about the trio? That was
the
also...
trio, yes. That took a second place too. That was 2 years later. The Viola Sonata was 1919. Just think, that's 57 years ago. It's a lifetime.
Yes, indeed.
2 lifetimes. Well, and 2 years after that, the prize was for a trio. And I thought, well, I'll have another shot. And I sent that in. And actually, I rather like the trio better than the sonata, I'm not sure. But there it again tied was with second place, tied with an Italian composer called Renzo Bossi. Because it was I'm trying to think of the word. International. The contest was international. And that, I don't think, and you know, I really think that this is going to be almost the first performance in New York of that trio.
Really?
Because although it was played at 2 or 3 private things at that time, I can't remember us having a public performance.
Was this very frustrating to you, not to have public performances even after the works had been acknowledged in competitions and so forth?
Yeah, I'm afraid I wasn't very good at that kind of thing, you know. I never was much good at blowing my own horn. How did you mean exactly?
Well, I mean, was it something that was very frustrating to you that there were not more performances of the work?
There were quite a number of performances in England, and it was done in Paris. But I can't remember that it had a great many performances. But of course, after it got printed, I suppose it may have been done when I didn't know anything about it.
Yes. Now, just tell us about the songs. You mentioned that...
Oh, those songs.
Are they all early works?
No. Shy One was the very first song that I ever had published. And I wrote it, I told you, when I was quite young. And the Seal Man, that's not there. The Seal Man comes in 1 key only, and I hope to goodness Mr. Barron doesn't need to have that transposed, because it's quite long and more elaborate. And then I wrote the Seal Man, I think, in the same year that I wrote the trio.
Which was what now?
I beg pardon?
What year?
1921. I think I wrote that in 1921. And then the last one, June Twilight, I wrote much later. It's one of the last things I did.
And when was that? Do you
I
recall?
can't tell you the exact. I should think it might have been about 1925.
26 it was published here.
Oh, yes, I may have written that in about 25.
Now, you say that's one of the last works you wrote. Why did you stop writing songs?
Why did I stop writing altogether?
Yes.
Well, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? I don't know. There's a lot of personal considerations, and I just stopped. I did do a few things after that, but not much. I just dried up. I'll tell you something I did write, and that was in, I think, as late as 1942. I wrote a duo in several movements, of a suite for clarinet and viola. I wrote it because I had a brother who was a very good clarinetist. He was a biochemist, really, but he was an extremely good clarinetist, and I sent that in I expect you know about the International Music Society, ISCM, I think they called it. Well, they had a meeting in Berkeley in 1942. I suppose I must have written that suite before 1942 then. And it was chosen in the English group among, I was one of the 3 English composers who had something chosen for that. And I was rather thrilled about that.
I imagine. But that didn't
it's never been published, and I've never shown it to a publisher. I didn't, I seem to lose my interest in, I can't really quite tell you all about it, but...
And even then, it didn't make you want to go back and do other things?
I wanted to, but I couldn't.
It's surprising that someone with so many ideas would suddenly feel...
I beg pardon?
Well, someone who has had so many ideas and was able to work...
I have lots of sketches of things. I know, and I miss it very much, because there's nothing in the... Do you compose?
No, I'm afraid not. No.
There's nothing in the world more thrilling, or practically nothing. But you can't do it unless... At least I can't. Maybe that's where a woman's different. I can't do it unless it's the first thing I think of every morning when I wake, and the last thing I think of every night before I go to sleep, and that I have it in my mind all the time. And if one allows too many other things to take over, one's liable not to be able to do it. That's been my experience.
So you need that intensity and that concentration.
Yes, I can't do it otherwise. And I always feel that each thing I do, this is what I used to feel, that each thing I do is going to be the last thing I'm going to be capable of doing. It always seems sort of a little bit accidental. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yes, you do, you do. But I just would like to think that you're going to continue.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't continue now.
Why?
Oh, I haven't got the vitality. It takes a lot. I used to feel drained after I'd been very busy. I'd work at something and start in the morning after breakfast, and then I'd suddenly begin to feel hungry. And I'd look at the time and it would be 3:30 or something like that, and I hadn't had any lunch.
It just took over
Yes,
your spirit.
It does take over. And then I was also doing a good deal of playing, a lot of playing, quartet playing.
How do you feel about this occasion now when we're going to have performances of your pieces?
I'm pleased, very much pleased. I haven't had a little one-man show, a sort of mini revival like this, for quite a long time.
Well, we are very pleased
Most
about
people, well, you're awfully nice to do it, but most people don't even know that I ever did any, a great many people don't even know I ever did any composing, because I didn't like talking about it very much, simply because I think I regretted not doing it anymore.
Well, I'm very pleased that we are having this tribute.
Well, I'm awfully pleased. But I played with very interesting people. If you want to hear anything about that.
Well, by all means.
The Ravel, for instance, came to London and had 2 chamber concerts, and I played at both of those.
Really?
And have you time for me to tell you a rather strange story about him?
Please, of course.
Once when I was in Hungary, somebody told my fortune with tarot cards, and I was rather impressed because it was rather accurate. And I asked this young man who was staying in the same house that I was where he'd got those cards. He'd been living in Vienna. He said, "Oh, I got them off an old barrow in Vienna." And I said, "Well, get me a pack when you come across any more." And then he gave me his own pack. I took them back to England. I learned in a book exactly how you're supposed to do that. And I found I was extremely popular. People would ask me always to bring my tarot cards to their parties, you know. Well, after one of the Ravel concerts, a party was given for him, and I was telling somebody's fortune, and Ravel came up and listened. And of course I knew him then, because we'd been rehearsing together and all that. He was a very strangely, very nice, very strangely quiet, reserved person, rather secretive, I should imagine, almost. I knew nothing whatever about him. And he said, would I tell his fortune? So I said, I'd be enchantée. And I don't know if you know how you lay out the tarot cards.
No.
You lay them out. Well, the victim, first, there are many more. There's 72 in the pack. I've given the whole thing up years ago, because I began to believe in it. Well, anyway, to go back to Ravel, I laid the cards out as he cut them. He cuts them, you see, and then I offer him certain cards, face down, to choose, and I put them in. And then I looked at them and I said, this is the most extraordinary thing, Mr. Ravel. If you're interested in les choses d'amour, you're very quiet about it, because there's not a single trace of it in this thing. The cups, you know, in the old tarot cards, the cups represent the hearts. And he looked slightly taken aback, but not very much. He said, well, go on. I said, well, I see you have the genius card. And he said, bon. And I finished his. He said, is there nothing at all about love in my hand? And I said, no, not a thing. But I said, the funny thing is that there's a woman here, a dark woman. And he said, then he looked rather startled. And I said, I can't tell you anything about her except that she's very dark. Well, we finished. I was simply going by the rules. I never dared tell people what I sense. It's very easy to sense what people are thinking, you know, when they're sitting opposite you, wondering what you're going to say. Very easy. I couldn't I was embarrassed ever to do that. Anyhow, this finished, and a couple of days later, a woman in London who used to entertain all the artists who came ran into me, and she said, Ravel lunched with me a couple of days after you told his fortune, and he said to me, did Rebecca Clarke know that I was living with a negress in Paris? Well, I was half mystified and half thought he was just fooling her, you know, until a great many years later, when here in this very room, an old friend of mine from England who was married to a man, I can't think of his name now, who was supposed to be a financial wizard, came and had tea. And he had been abroad a great deal, and he happened to mention Ravel. He said he'd known Ravel. So I said, oh, I must tell you this story. So I told him this story. And when I said that he said that Ravel had said I was living with a negress, this man said, oh yes, I knew her. And then I was really quite taken aback. And apparently that was at that time that he wrote the Chanson Maracas. But of course I don't know what the true story was, but it's a strange story, isn't it? And finally I gave up telling fortunes because I found I was beginning to believe it myself.
Did you ever tell your own?
Oh yes, but you're not supposed to do that, you know. And in any case, they say you can't, because you're too much, you're biased.
Well, but if it's cards and it's a matter
I know. Oh yes, I told my own a number of times. It came out different every time.
I see. Well, listen, this has been very special for us. I want to thank you for your help, and I'm just delighted that we can say happy birthday this way.
Well, I only wish to goodness I could feel I could come. But you know, these last days, these last weeks of humidity have really got me down. I've had such bad arthritis that I haven't been sleeping well, and I'm awfully tired. I went out the other day with some friends. You haven't got your thing on, have you? I mean, this is only purely uninteresting. I went out with some friends the other day. They drove me to Westchester to have lunch at some rather nice inn out there. And I was frightfully tired when I got home. I hadn't been out for almost a year. And it doesn't seem to me that unless I happen to feel very fresh the day of your broadcast, I don't think I'd be much use, really.
Well, that's exactly why I wanted to tape this. We have this now. If you do feel well enough and happy enough and it's a nice day and you would like to come and join us, so much the better.
Of course I'd like to.
Well,
and everybody's trying to plot, to think of where all my... I've got 3 great nephews, 3 tall great nephews, who are all plotting to try and see how they can get me there. But I really don't know.
Fine.
Is it tell me, I'd like to know one thing. Is it do you have an audience?
No.
You don't?
It will just be in our studio.
Yes.
So,
well, I was wondering, you don't have, is anybody allowed in the studio? Or is that forbidden? I mean, any listener?
Well, we can, if you would like somebody to come, of course.
Because I might have 2 very, really my greatest friends from Washington.
By all means.
Might be
Of
here,
course.
and I think they might love to come.
Absolutely.
He's a musician, they're both
Perfect.
musicians. He's called Wendell Keeney, I doubt if you'd know his name. But they're very great friends of mine.
By all means. Of course, they're welcome. Certainly. So, but that's the point. We would love to have you. We hope that you'll be able to come there. But if you don't feel like it, if it's raining or anything else, fine, we have the tape.
I wouldn't mind getting wet, but it's just this miserable arthritis.
Well, let's see what happens.
And
Don't
by
feel
the
like
way, I remember last time on the Myra Hess program, you were very nice. You put it very nicely. You said Mrs. Friskin doesn't get about too well these days. Do you remember? I think I'd almost rather you said Mrs. Friskin has quite bad arthritis. Otherwise, it sounds as if it is just decrepitude, you know.
Oh, no one who talks the way you do can be accused of that.
Well, I don't know.
Well,
I feel extremely decrepit these days.
don't. It's wonderful to hear
But
you.
when the weather clears up, you never know.
All right. Thank you very